What's up, you curious cats? I noticed that my videos, I get the most views when I talk about the economic crisis, the economic collapse that's unfolding right now. And when I speak about other stuff, it doesn't get as many views. So I thought I'd basically speak on that, and hopefully I can reach a few more people. And I'll touch on some other stuff, but to get any deeper into it, you're gonna have to go to my channel and check out some of my other videos. So I'll try this approach. I noticed that it seems like they're actually really shadow banning or censoring a lot of the stuff I talk about. So I'm going to be careful about what I talk about in this video, and if you want to know more about other stuff, you're going to have to check out my other videos. So just doing some morning chores here. I got to let the chickens out, so you're going to have to bear with me for 1 second here. Here's my girls. Hello, ladies. You ready to come out? And so yeah, I definitely think there is a big market correction coming. I know we already had a bit of a correction, but I think we're going to have another big leg down. And the reason for that is just that there's so much debt out. So when there's this much debt out, there's a lot of people that, especially now with a lot of us being ordered to stay home, people can't run their businesses, and they have all this debt to service. So they have huge mortgage payments, they have a bunch of financial investments that aren't doing as well. So people are in a bit of a financial situation and they don't have the money to cover it. So what happens in that situation is they start to sell off stocks, they start to sell off investments like second, third homes, that kind of stuff. And also a lot of people had Airbnbs, so they bought into real estate because everyone said, you know, you can't go wrong with real estate. So people bought these overpriced homes and they justified it by basically doing the math with Airbnb and saying, okay, well, if I rented out this home 20 out of the 30 days per month at X amount of dollars, then I can afford this mortgage. But what they didn't factor in is something like this whole COVID thing, where Airbnb gets shut down or a lot of the travel quiets down and now you can't rent out the place. So no one looks at the kind of the obstacles of what could happen. And now we're in this situation. So a lot of these people are going to be in a bit of a situation, and what that does is it puts a lot of downward pressure on these overinflated assets. So when people are going to retire and all of a sudden they don't have, their stocks are worth, let's say, half of what they were, and real estate starts to come down, well, are they going to hold that house and ride it out for who knows how long this deflationary period might be? It might be 5 years, it might be 10, or it could be 20 or 30 years like Japan. We don't know. So when you have retirees going to retire, do you think they're actually going to choose to hold that house if the market starts to turn? Or are they going to go and liquidate? And so with the boomers all entering retirement and being the largest population that we have, I believe that a lot of them are going to sell their second and third investment properties because a ton of them were invested in real estate, and that's going to create a lot of downward pressure. And the other thing is that a lot of these boomers, their investments were in traditional markets and let's say pension funds. And the pension funds were all heavily exposed to the real estate market. And the real estate market is completely dependent on, we need jobs. People, right now, the banks are tightening up their policies and they're not lending to just anyone. And so you can't get a mortgage if you don't have a job. They won't, like here in Canada, they won't even give you a mortgage if you're self-employed. So you have to be an employee or a wage slave for somebody else, and a lot of those jobs right now are shut down. So there's a ton of people that can't get mortgages. And my opinion is that this is all orchestrated because they want the wealth that the boomers created. So by intentionally crashing the markets, they basically force a lot of people to sell, and then no one has money because our debt to earning ratio is at record highs. And the only people that have money in this situation are the bankers, the central bankers, and anyone who's buddies with them. So they are printing record amounts of money and they're loaning it out. And you have to be on the in with these guys. And if you are, then you get basically zero interest loans. So you and I have to pay high interest, and we have to be able to afford this money, and we need jobs to pay the interest, to pay these bankers to take this debt money. But if you're on the in with these guys, it's basically no interest loans. There's no risk. You can just go borrow as much money as you want at 0% interest. So where's the risk? There's no risk. So these guys, the central banking cartel, are going to come in and they're going to buy everything with all this phony money that they're creating. And what this is going to do is it's going to be a huge wealth transfer. The wealth is going to go from all the boomers who thought they had all this wealth because they were holding real estate, and their assessment said their house was worth 1.5 million and they had 6 of them. So they do the math and they're like, oh, I have $9 million. And now what happens is there's downward pressure. Real estate can correct 50% quite easily, and now their wealth gets cut in half and their stocks get cut in half, and it's all valued in fiat dollars. So it's all their net worth is valued in US dollars, in Canadian dollars. But what they're not factoring in is that the government is printing all this money, and that creates huge devaluation in the currencies. So not only are their investments losing, but everything's valued in these government currencies. So also the buying power of these government currencies are devaluing. So even though, on paper you're worth $1 million, in 10 years, that $1 million is probably going to have the purchasing power of 200,000, maybe 500,000 at best. So this is the issue, where so many of these boomers, they're just doing what they've been told and what's traditionally worked, but it's a new time. It doesn't work to just hold all your money in real estate, stocks, and government currencies. It's a crisis, and they're basically going after all that wealth. And so if these guys are going to play the traditional route, I think a lot of them are going to get wrecked. They're basically, the governments are intentionally crashing this so that they can steal that wealth. So when they order everyone to stay home and they shut down all these services where people can't work, so people are forced to sell these assets, the government come in and the banking cartel, they're kind of interlinked. A lot of the governments are owned by these big corporations, big oil, big banking, all that. They're all intertwined. It's all these super rich elite families that own all this stuff. And so they come in and they buy all the assets while they're under distress. And then your average middle class person basically gets burned. And right now they're giving out all this free money, which people think is a good thing on the surface. They're like, oh, I'm getting, $1,200 in the US or $2,000 in Canada, and everyone's happy about that, but they don't realize that they're printing this money, and all that printing is devaluing the currency. So that's actually wiping out the middle class, because we're all busy working for these dollars, but the dollars will lose value. I love using this analogy of the punch at the party, where you have the punch and everyone's drunk and buzzed and having fun, and the punch starts to run dry and you don't have any more rum or whatever you're mixing it with, and you don't want the party to end. You don't want people to know the party's over, so you just add a little more juice to the punch bowl, and people keep drinking it and they think, oh, the party's still going, there's still punch, but the punch doesn't have the effect that it once did. The alcohol isn't in there, so they keep drinking it, but the effect doesn't work. So they drink more and more, hoping for the same effect, and it doesn't work. And that's what's happening with our currencies. People are earning more and more, thinking that's what's going to get them ahead, but they don't realize that they keep watering down the currency supply, which is lessening the effect of, or the purchasing power in this case, of those dollars. So that's basically what's going on. There's this huge wealth transfer, And there's ways around it. You're going to have to look through my videos to look at other ways that you can basically make some plays during this time so you can actually get ahead during this wealth transfer. But you need to start paying attention. I highly recommend you start studying money, where it comes from. Learn all this stuff for yourself. I've been fascinated by money for the last 20 years, and that's how come I've learned a lot about all this. But a lot of people have never even stopped to think where government currencies come from, or how they're created, or how the whole financial system works. And now during this crisis, a lot of people are going to be waking up to it, and they're going to be asking, well, if the government can just print money, how does that work? Why do we need to pay tax dollars? If they can just print it, why am I so busy working and slaving away and they just come in and take half of it? Does that make sense? So a lot of people are going to start asking questions, and a lot of people are going to start figuring out the truth. So that's just a little overview of this financial situation. And like I said, look through my videos. I talk about ways and other options to basically get out of these government currencies, and ways that we can diversify so that we're not completely getting burned with all this money printing and devaluation of the currencies. And I think diversity is the best thing we can do right now, because all these assets and investments are getting attacked and hit hard. And if you have all your money in any one thing, then you're left quite fragile or quite vulnerable. So by diversifying, even though one of your assets might tank, you have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 other assets that will hopefully sustain some value. And as long as you're not losing everything, there's still hope. So that's my thing. Even if you lose 80% of your wealth, 20% is enough to gain it back if you're smart and you know what you're doing. But what's going to happen, a lot of these boomers are going to get burned because they're used to these traditional systems, and you can't blame them. I mean, traditionally that worked to just save in US dollars or Canadian dollars, but it's a different time. If you look at the money supply charts, we've never printed this much money in history, and every time there's money printing, then there's devaluation of the dollars. So if you look at the chart, the money supply graph goes up very slowly over the last 100 years. And then 2008 hits and it goes parabolic. It basically goes straight up. And we've just done that again recently, where this most current financial crisis, they just started printing trillions of dollars again, which is going to eventually equate to massive inflation. However, things are still deflating even with all this money printing. So that's not a good thing, because the Keynesian economists that run this whole system, the only weapon they have or solution they have is more money creation. So they're going to keep creating more money, trying to keep things afloat, keep this Ponzi scheme going. And as they do that, it eventually will come into the system. All this money they printed eventually floods back into the system, and it will create hyperinflation. And basically all of the assets, the true assets like arable land, homes, businesses, fresh water, all of this stuff will become completely unaffordable for your average person. The middle class will be wiped out. I think that is a big part of this plan. They want to get rid of the middle class because the middle class consumes a lot. They want to knock the middle class into poverty. And while this is all happening, the really poor in places like India and China are rising up slightly. So their quality of life's coming up, and then the middle class in North America is being slowly eaten away at, or it's slowly declining, and our quality of life and the purchasing power of our dollars are slowly getting worse, and the assets are becoming less affordable for us. And this is just this huge cycle that's happening. So we have a demographic cycle where all the boomers are going to retire, and they're downsizing, they're selling off assets to fund retirement. And we have an economic cycle where it's this boom bust cycle that you can follow through the years, and we're at a bust cycle. This is how Keynesian economics works, and this is how it works when your government, or when we don't have hard money. It creates a boom bust cycle because they print all this money. It eventually comes in the form of inflation. Then everything gets really expensive and everyone thinks they're doing all well with all their assets appreciating, and then boom, it crashes, and then it's just this cycle that continues and continues. And another cycle that's most likely coming to an end is the world reserve currency, which has been the US dollar. And traditionally, I'm not positive, don't quote me on this, but I think it's something like 37 years is the average lifespan of a world reserve currency. And I think the US dollar has had world reserve status for just under 50 years now. I could have those numbers slightly off, but it's something like that. And basically, it's time for a new world reserve currency because the playing field hasn't been level. When the US can just come print money out of thin air and buy hard assets from other countries, they can go to the world market and buy limited resources like oil or gold or whatever with money that they just come and create out of thin air. That's not a fair system. And so that's been hindering world global trade when the currency we're using is being manipulated. It's like playing Monopoly and the banker is always winning because if he needs money, he just sneaks it out of the money supply when no one's looking. So that's what's happening with the US dollar, and no one wants to play with them anymore because it hasn't been a level playing field. And so other countries have tried to demand gold for their oil, let's say, and the US has basically gone in and attacked them and taken out those leaders, because if people stop accepting US dollars, they're in big trouble. Now the US actually has to produce something of value to trade for these other assets, and they're very limited on the assets they have. Everyone's talking about shale gas and they, they have all these resources. I don't buy it. And they also say they have all this gold. I really don't think the US has all the gold and the assets they claim they do. They are very limited. They're stuck in a corner where they only have this opportunity they've been taking advantage of, where they have world reserve status and they can print the money out of thin air and buy assets on a world market with it. So they've been taking advantage of that situation, but that's going to come to an end because we need a hard money that is basically equal or fair for all nations. That's how we create global trade and a really prosperous economy, is by having a hard money that's fair for everyone, that if you want to acquire it, you actually have to produce something of value or trade an actual asset for it. So that's why I believe it's time for the US dollar to fall and we're going to have a new currency rise up. And the new currency this is going to be a good thing. It's going to be hard. We're going to have to go through the fire. We're going to have deflation. A lot of people are going to get wrecked. A lot of the debtors are going to get wrecked. And however, it's going to create a great opportunity for a new currency to rise up and to create a system that's built on trust and equality, and create a fair system so that we can open up global trade a little more and we can all be saving money. We work so hard for this money. We don't want to be saving it when it's just completely losing value all the time, and they're actually just forcing us now to just spend it. They don't even want people to save. That's why they have negative interest rates. They want to basically have negative rates so that they'll charge you to have savings. Now, listen to that. That's completely insane. But this is where we're going. They're going to charge you to have any amount of savings in your bank, and they're going to pay you to take debt. That's how desperate these bankers are to keep this Ponzi going. So when that's the environment we're in, how do you promote productivity? If everyone's, you have to be productive to get these dollars, but the dollars are losing value. where's the motivation? Why do I want to work so hard for Canadian dollars or US dollars when they're just losing so much value? I don't. There's not much motivation. I worked so hard the last 20 years and I've been saving all my money, but the money doesn't buy me a house even. I can't even buy a house with it. It's completely insane. So we need hard money to come back to be able to preserve our wealth. And when you can actually earn money that holds your wealth or even increases your wealth, then there's a lot of motivation for you to be productive because you can actually get ahead. If you can go and work really hard for 2 or 3 years and get a house and have a business and provide for your family, that's a lot more motivation than going to hustle for 60 hours a week and you can't even afford a rental, you can't even afford to have a wife or kids, and you're stuck eating GMO food and looking for handouts whenever you can. That's the situation we're in, and that's what you get when you don't have hard money and when your currency supply is rotting. The currency is at the basis, the root of this entire system, and when it's rotting and corrupt, none of us can prosper. So we need hard money to return. We need a better system, and it's out there. It already exists. It's just people need to wake up and they need to start learning about this and why we need hard money, what it is, why to start using it, why to choose different currencies than these government currencies. So I recommend that you guys look through some of my other videos and follow some other people too. I'll make some recommendations later on, or message me if you're interested. But definitely do your own research, start to learn about the financial system and about how this all works, ways that we can save our wealth in alternative currencies or alternative methods so that we don't get burned by this massive orchestrated global takedown and economic crisis that they're creating to basically take advantage of the largest wealth transfer in history. So this is all going down. It's a very critical time to start paying attention and taking action. And with that being said, I'm going to leave it at that. I hope you guys are inspired to do a little more research and to learn a little more about money. It really is a fascinating subject. And a lot of people really just want to bury their head in the sand when they hear that. People aren't interested in money. It's a little overwhelming for most. They tend to use big fancy words to keep people a little bit confused and overwhelmed by the financial world because they want people to be financially illiterate so that they can take advantage of us over and over and over and basically keep us wage slaves and keep us impoverished. So with that being said, I'm going to leave it at that. Make sure you guys take control of your lives, do what you can, self-empowerment, radical self-reliance, create anti-fragility, prosper, stay healthy, all those things, and together we'll rise up through all of this. With that being said, have a great day. I love you guys.